Hi, good morning, and welcome to another edition of the Sunday Journal. I'm Kari Steele. Our very distinguished guest this morning, oh my gosh, her list of credentials. Dr. Tracey Wilen is a prominent thought leader on the impact of technology on society, work, and careers. She's been a scholar at Stanford University. She's held leadership positions at Apple, HP, Cisco, and the Apollo Group. Dr. Wilen has authored 11 books, including Women Lead, Career Perspectives from Workplace Leaders, and her newest book, Employed for Life, 21st Century Career Trends. Dr. Wilen, good morning, and thanks so much for being with us this morning.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Dr. Wilen is in the middle of a media tour right now, talking specifically about women and Women Up, because March is Women's Month, and she says it's time to women up. We are looking at up trends in 2015 for women of all ages. So, Dr. Wilen, can we start there?
Oh, sure. I have been tracking women's trends for quite some time, and in 2014 I was incredibly optimistic about women, and then I saw the momentum continuing in 2015. So I wrote a blog called Women Up, which is just a play on the words man up.
Mm-hmm.
So let me tell you some of the things that I'm seeing. First, I want to talk about women in the workforce. And the important thing here to note is when you see trends, right, it's kind of like the stock market. You buy low and sell high. Watch the trends so that you understand where you can make your next moves in the workforce. So one of the key trends I've been tracking for quite some time is in 2014 there was a lot of visibility and transparency around two things. One is diversity in organizations, and number two is salary discrepancy. And so diversity in the organization is Google. Google came out with a very data-rich study on their own firm saying the numbers are off. And we need to do something about it and invest in women and minorities and move the pipeline up. At the same time, that forced 9 other firms to really take action and analyze their own workplaces, and they found the same thing. So what I say to women, when you start to see momentum of a lot of news and a lot of funding towards things to equalize the landscape, that's when you want to raise your hand up and say, okay, let's talk about salary. Let's talk about promotion. Let's talk about opportunities for me inside the firm. So that trend to me is very apparent and something I think women should take advantage of. The second trend for 2015 is really about the jobs market. So in 2014, the last quarter, we had very strong jobs reports, and that continued into 2015. And what the analysts were saying is that replacement hiring, which is filling the open gap so that people leave when they leave the firm, was the only hiring that we were doing, and now we're doing something called growth hiring, which is mean that we're hiring people for the future. And that says to me, okay, it's not working out for you inside the firm, now you want to look outside the firm. And a few reasons here is one is there are competition customers and vendors who will probably gladly hire you. And number two is for a higher price. And in some of my research, I found that people can make a job shift, income shift of 20 to 25% at various job moves. So I look at 2015 as a great opportunity time for women both inside the firm or if they're deciding to make their next move.
Are there specific jobs that you see trending up for women right now?
Well, there's a lot of job areas that are in high demand. The highest demand, of course, is going to be computer sciences and biotechnology. I mean, we have skill shortages there. And, I encourage women that if you have these skills, that's where the money is, right? Because whenever you have a shortage of something, then people have to pay more to get you. But there's other areas that will be in growth, healthcare. We're living longer. Our baby boomers are living longer. There's a focus on health. So there's a lot of new areas being added in healthcare. And I would even look at areas that you may not have thought about, which is something like security, data security, physical security, terrorism. I mean, all of this, unfortunately, in the news every day suggests, right, another trend is there's a lot of hiring there, and security is projected to be one of the largest hiring areas over the next few years.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, do you have advice for people on where they should get training to learn the skills in these areas? Have you done some research on that? Do you think maybe the vocational schools are going to become popular again?
Well, okay, so number one, if you're working now, I always encourage people, look and see what they offer internally, right? So learn the technologies of your industry and have it done while you're working, because it's probably going to be free and you're going to have hands-on. And even if that's classes in the corporation, or they're funding you, right, through tuition reimbursement or something like that. Right. So the second area is, yes, you can go back to evening school, community colleges, vocational colleges, adult education, or even to, tech camps. I regularly go to Microsoft and Apple stores for one-on-one tutoring, and it's very, very inexpensive or free. So it just depends on where your targets are, where you want to work, and then what kind of opportunities can you find there. I was just talking to a gentleman that worked at Toyota in the South, and then they put him into school because they couldn't find anyone coming out of the schools, and so they trained him. So you may find opportunities, quite frankly, in the firms today because they really want to have a skilled workforce.
I've been hearing that a lot in hosting this show. I've talked to a lot of people that are saying, the jobs are out there, but because it's a whole different kind of skill set that you need to know that's not really being taught the traditional way. There's a lot of jobs out there that people just aren't trained for.
Yeah, and it's unfortunately the onus is on the employee or the consumer, basically, to get your own skills up to speed. And that's why I encourage people, if you are absolutely working, look at what kind of training they offer, both free and also what kind of reimbursement programs they have. Because, I myself have taken advantage of that to keep myself educated, and it's a lower cost than if you actually have to fund it yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people of my generation, the late 40s, approaching 50, we're seeing a lot of people my age now making complete career changes because, again, the jobs that were traditional jobs when we were coming out of college, it's a whole different world now.
It is, and so something like I have a lot of colleagues, while they're in the firms, they try to make lateral moves, and I think that's really smart. The colleague who moved out of marketing and moved into the big data, new division in the company. Another colleague moved out of sales and moved into cloud computing. Right? You've heard these buzzwords. Another colleague of mine developed social media skills. These are the technologies that are the future. And if you can, through a cross-functional team, a lateral move, or a high-visibility project inside your firm, move into these new areas, you'd be better off. In manufacturing, look at 3D printing and robotics, because that's the wave.
That is crazy, isn't it?
Oh, it's amazing, all of the technologies, but it's here to stay, and so we need to really, wrap our heads around it and get our hands wet.
Now, you're suggesting lateral moves because, A, maybe the company will pay you for that training or provide that training, and B, maybe because you're not going to lose your seniority then?
No, lateral moves is just to develop your own skills and experience. So what we're finding today is, if you work with recruiters, is that for senior executive levels, it's no longer that one person on the vertical ladder. It's the person who has a lot of experience and expertise and skills in a different cross-functional areas. And so a lot of firms don't have programs. And so one way that you can develop your own program, you say, well, I really like the firm I work for, but I really need to develop more skills, and so I need to move from marketing into sales, or sales into finance, or finance into engineering. You're creating your own value. If the firm doesn't recognize it, an outside firm certainly will. And, and I would say spend enough time there so that you have accomplishments and metrics, proven results that you can quantify and show how you increase sales, decrease costs, or improve the process in some way.
So interesting. And again, we asked Dr. Wilen to come on with us specifically now, because March is Women's History Month. It was just International Women's Day. So we're kind of specifically talking about women in business right now. Do you find more women now are starting their own business or are self-employed?
Yes, and so this is, again, a trend. If you can get what you want inside a company, and then maybe you've tried some other firms, if you hit a wall, women are going to find a path. And the next path, which is very lucrative for women and promising, is having their own businesses. And in fact, women-owned firms grew at 1.5 times the national average. Women today own 25% of franchises. You may have not thought about franchising as a business ownership, but it is. I mean, many of us remember the female realtor, but today it's so much more. Women are, owning all kinds of franchises, food franchises, spa franchises, education franchises, clothing franchises. And this is a viable business because you can control your income, you can hire people, you can own many. And then the second area that I get very excited about is, our younger women in their startups. Last year was $740 a day. This year it's $1,200 a day, and that's expecting to increase. And what we're finding is that women are dominating now the crowdfunding space. You may have heard of sites called Kickstarter or Indiegogo. This is where people actually post their aspiring startups and people pledge money to it. And women are dominating here, and their businesses regularly outperform their male counterparts. So to me, that's just the trend is women are moving in a direction where they find the opportunity, where they can manage, their own lives and their careers, and business ownership is a key one.
And these startups, what types of businesses are they trying to raise funds to start up?
Oh, there's a whole variety. Of course, I was very excited because they just did a whole spread on women in their technology startups, from SlideShare to TaskRabbit, but to security firms and wireless firms, but also in the areas of, education, Huntington Learning Centers, hair, Great Clip, School of Rock. There's a number of areas. It's really wherever your interest is.
Mm-hmm.
Many women are doing home-based businesses, and others are just going out. And, the place to look is Entrepreneur Magazine to see what kind of franchises are out there, at what price points, and you can get involved.
That's exactly what I was going to ask you is where do you start? Sometimes it's just so overwhelming. We all sit there and we think we have a great idea. A lot of, the success of the show, Shark Tank, everybody is always, gosh, I wish I would have thought of that. So you're saying Entrepreneur Magazine might give you some ideas, but then where do you start? Where do you go? Okay, I have a business plan. I'm not sure how to write that. What do you suggest?
Yeah, so that's why I'm very big on franchising, because I'm one of those people. I don't have a great technology idea for a startup. I don't really have any great ideas for a startup. And so I wouldn't be the kind of person to start up. However, I have a very good business background, and I've run large teams. And so a franchise would actually be more appealing to me, or to buy a business. I mean, you can look at, there's a number of ads of people selling everything from flower shops to restaurants to stores. But the franchise is intriguing because it's already set up for you. You just have to find the match to what you like, if it's food or if it's flowers or if it's food or if it's, spa, and then look to see how much it is to buy in. A McDonald's is going to be very expensive to buy in, but something like an H&R Block or some of, Curve's Gym, some of these other franchises may be low price points. What's good about it is the company actually does the business plan for you. They give you the brand. They pick the location. You then develop the expertise in running the local shop and providing input back into the franchise community.
So you see that a franchise might be available for sale. Do you go find an attorney then to work this out for you? I'm sure that there's attorneys involved with that, but what I would do is go look and see what are the requirements of the franchise, and call the firm. I mean, they usually post it. Okay.
Call them and say, I'm interested. What does it cost? What's involved? What do I need to know? Because it's a formula. It's basically a formula on how to run a business.
Are you finding that there's a trend in women becoming bigger advocates for themselves now?
Well, each generation brings in new expectation and new levels of confidence. So in my research for the book Women Lead, what we found is our millennial women were by far more confident than baby boomer women and Gen X women, but they were also more confident than millennial men. So our millennial women, I think, are really going to rock the world, so to speak, with confidence and with energy and education. It also is, the largest generation. The baby boomers was around 77 million. Generation X was relatively small with 65 million, and our millennials have 83 million. So that's your pipeline. That's your pipeline for work. That's your pipeline for future businesses, and that's where the energy is coming from. And they're the most educated population to date, and they're more technical than the previous generation. So we can be very optimistic about them. If they want the opportunity, they can pursue it.
One of the things that I'm also very optimistic about is the women that are becoming more involved in politics. Very smart women who have become the voice of all of us. They're actually being heard. How do you feel about this trend? We're seeing more women play bigger roles in our political system.
Well, it's the topic of conversation. You know, we started off with boom in January 2015. Who's going to run for or against Hillary? I mean, that was just like the mantra. And then, of course, I look at all the TV shows. I was watching Madam Secretary. I was looking at Veep. Oh, she became president. Looking at House of Cards. Now we have ambassadors.
Good wife.
Yeah, so you just see the trend. TV always follows the trends, too, of where are we putting women now, and we're putting them in higher and higher positions. We have more women now in the Congress and Senate than years before. That will continue. It's just been a continual progression. And as women see other women in political power, they have role models. They have, people that they can reflect on or talk to or emulate for their own future. So that to me is an optimistic point about politics.
Yeah, I agree. And I also have some notes here that I got when I knew I was going to have you on the air. I was doing a little research, and you made a note here that boomer women numbers are up on traveling and shacking up. Can you kind of define that for me?
Sure, and I'll add a third one. They're buffing up too.
Buffing up, okay.
Buffing up too. So on traveling, AARP, which is the American Association of Retired Persons Association Group, did a study on what trends were happening with our boomer women who were more seasoned and retired, so to speak. And they found that they're leading this trend of travel. And many were taking 4 to 5 trips a year, mostly in the U.S., but some overseas, and they were doing it because they had a bucket list. They had a lot of places that they wanted to see while they couldn't do it while they were raising a family or working. A lot of them just wanted to take a summer vacation, and a lot are, doing more family things, multi-generational types of trips. On Shacking Up, you probably may remember a show called Golden Girls, and that's been reinvigorated. That's about 4 widowed or divorced women over 55 who decided to live together as roommates in Florida. And they shared everything. They shared boyfriends, they shared the chores, they shared the finances, but it was a social opportunity for them as well. And when you think about it today, our boomer women are saying, I don't want to go live alone. I don't want to go live with my kids again. So it's much more fun if I can, have roommates again. And so this is back in season. I mentioned buffing up just because I got a newsletter from the YMCA that was touting that over the last 3 years that the number of age 65 enrollment in their clubs was up over 34%. And it's really people taking care of themselves. You're living longer, you're working longer certainly, but you need to take care of your health as well. And so we're seeing that women are also driving this new boom of buffing up again. So pretty hot stuff for our boomer women.
I would say so. Things are definitely very encouraging. It sounds like your trends are all good news. But we started the interview and you were talking about if you should be pursuing job promotions, salary increases, maybe executive leadership roles. So do you have tips on how you kind of serve up those suggestions?
Yes, and I encourage women to be very, very thoughtful and very careful and prepare for this. But number one, you absolutely have to know your worth. Either do it by asking HR if they won't help you, go out to look at salary surveys, look at the websites, Glassdoor.com, Payscale.com, talk to industry recruiters, talk to your colleagues, understand what you're worth. Because if you don't know what you're worth, you don't know what to ask for. Number 2 is keep metrics on yourself. I used to encourage my teams do 1 metric a day. What did you save the company? Or what did you reduce a cost? Did you improve a process? Did you add a customer? Something that affects the P&L, the profit and loss line, so that when you have your data and your metrics quantified, You can walk in, know what you're worth, and have a candid discussion around the data points, not an emotional discussion. I think it's also important inside a firm to understand the grade ranges. A lot of companies have levels. You need to understand what the leveling system is so you understand where you can move or what the opportunity is or where the next bump is. Another is I think you have to understand the annual percent increases. I had a colleague who told me he was so upset because he only got a 3% raise. Well, I said, why don't you go out to the firm and find out what was the average raise that year? He assumed it was closer to 5 or 10%. Well, the firm had an awful year. And so the people who were contributing were getting 3%, and a lot of people got none. So where he walked in with the perception that he did poorly, he actually did quite well. So I think you have to understand the percentages and what you can realistically expect. I think you have to make sure that your goals are known. So if you're ready for a lateral move or a unique assignment, or you want to develop your technology capability, or you want that overseas assignment, you need to be able to articulate and say, these are my goals, this is where I want to be, and frame the discussion. A lot of people walk in and say, I want to raise. Instead of casting it as, I enjoy working for this firm, here are my contributions, here's what I brought to the table, and now I'm ready for my next step. Can you help me get there? Here's some of the things that I was thinking about doing. That's a lot easier for a manager to digest than I want to raise. And in fact, a lot of times salary is not always the ideal. I remember one year getting a raise, and I ended up bringing home less money because my tax bracket went up at the same time, right? So you need to start thinking about other things that make value to you as well. And it might be a job move. It might be an overseas assignment. It might be a bonus. It might be telecommuting. It might be the health club. It could be tuition reimbursement. There's a lot of things that people need to look at as that has value to them.
I'm going to throw this out here as we kind of wrap this up, Dr. Wilen. If you are working for a manager who really isn't intentionally sexist, but you can tell in the way that he's been managing the company, he definitely thinks these are women's jobs and these are men's jobs, and you have approached your manager and said, I know in this particular department you need another employee, and that lateral move you're talking about, maybe you're saying, hey, I would like to be trained in that, or that's something I would like to do, but your manager kind of deflects it, and you get a sense it's because he doesn't think you're qualified because of your gender. Do you have any suggestions on what you might do next?
I sure do, and I think this happens to people a lot. You remember that you can network around the company, and most people should be actively networking both inside and outside of the company, because if your manager is not a good fit for you, another manager might be a better fit. And more companies are much more open about posting jobs and encouraging employees to make moves around the firm. Because let's face it, a lot of people leave the company because they have a bad manager. So instead of taking that route, I suggest you start exploring what jobs are open inside the firm, who do you know in the department, start talking to them, start talking to their managers, and do something called an informational interview. It can be 20 minutes on the phone, a half hour over a cup of coffee. Start to explore what the different kinds of jobs are, what would make sense for you to make a move into, where are the new areas. I always say the best time to get a new job is when you're in high growth, because there's always new business units, or you're in a downside, because if people get laid off, they need, unfortunately, backfill, people to fill the holes and offer up to take over a department because a lot of people are laid off. It sounds harsh, but you just realize the trend, right? It's in your best interest of where am I going to maneuver my next move and how am I going to get there.
Excellent advice. And before I let you go, I just want to make sure I give you a chance to address something that maybe we haven't shared with our listeners yet this morning. Is there anything else you want to leave them with as they go on about their Sunday?
Well, I think the big message I have for women and men is that, the world has changed. We're living longer. We're working longer. You're probably going to be working to 70 or 80 years old, which is for many of us 50 or 60 years. Therefore, you need to manage your own career. You need to make a plan for yourself and manage it because it's all about you now. A company is not going to take over your career for you and manage it for 50 years. It's just not going to happen. You're going to have at least 5 to 7 career stops or different experiences. So sit down and make an integrated plan for yourself, your work plan, your skills plan, your education plan, your finance plan, your health plan, so that you can achieve the goals that you really want to, whether it's retiring at 55 or owning a yacht, at age 70.
I think it all makes complete sense, and I'm so glad you took some time to talk to us this morning. Dr. Tracey Wilen, thought leader, global speaker, author of 11 books on career and business topics. She certainly knows of what she speaks, and we appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you so much.
And if you have something you would like to share with our audience, maybe an event, an organization, a particular topic that you have a lot of experience in, you can send me an email from the Sunday Journal page at KOST1035.com. Just look for the Kari Steele link there. And until next time, have a wonderful Sunday, and thank you so much for listening to Coast 103.5.